On this channel, I obviously talk an awful lot about Tesla and its full self-driving capabilities, and as I do that, I often mention things like L3 or L4 or L5 autonomy. But what does that actually mean? Let's take a look. For those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I've actually gotten a lot of questions about this, which made me realize that a lot of people just don't understand when you throw out things like, oh, L4 autonomy, and Tesla's gonna get there within 12 or 18 months or something. And I recently did a video where I actually said that, where I actually reduced it from what I thought would be about 18 months to about 12 months. And I said they would get to level 4 autonomy. And I had a whole bunch of people after that episode say, like, what in the heck does that actually mean? Can you please explain it? So this episode is actually going to explain level 0 all the way through level 5 autonomy and what it means. And in order to do that in the most kind of concrete way possible, I'm actually going to use the SAE document that was published in April of 2021. SAE is the Society of Automotive Engineers, Society of Automotive Engineers. So anyway, that's when you get the oil for your old ICE car, it says SAE on it. It's the Society of Automotive Engineers that have rated that as to what the winter and summer weightings are, etc. So anyway, that's who they are. I think that's a pretty reputable source. I'm going to use that document as the basis of what I'm going to talk about. And so I'm going to talk my way through each of the different levels of autonomy. But first of all, we actually have to start with a few acronyms, because when you actually read their documentation, it is full of acronyms, which makes it, of course, a little more difficult to read. You have to remember this is part of a document. And of course, I'll put a link to the original so you can download it yourself if you're interested in the description. But it's an engineering type of document, and so it's very, very specific, and the wording is not designed for the common layperson to read. So that's going to be my job today, is to try to explicate exactly what they mean by all of this. But first, we need to start with a few acronym definitions. So let's start with that. All right, the first term that you will see in this documentation is DDT, and that is not a pesticide. That's actually dynamic driving task. And what that means is the task that is at hand, and it's dynamic. So I guess to put it like, as opposed to something else like a roller coaster does a driving task, quote unquote, but it's on rails, and except for maybe the pneumatic brakes or something, it's pretty much not dynamic. It's just on those rails, and it can't really change its path. So dynamic driving task means that it has to be planning out the route. It has to adjust for traffic around it. It has to do lane changes, things like that. So that's a DDT, or a dynamic driving task. The next term is ODD, which is not odd. It's operational design domain. So operational design domain is actually going to be very important as we talk about some of these levels. I've had some people question me when I say that Tesla can get to level 4 autonomy and say that's not really possible, but it's going to come down to the ODD, or operational design domain, which is essentially that if you say that a car can only drive on the highways, and that's its ODD, or its operational design domain, that's the domain that you're going to make a claim about for whatever level of autonomy you're talking about. Or if you say that it can drive on city streets but not on dirt roads, or if you say it can drive during good weather conditions, but not if it's raining heavily or snowing, right? So it doesn't just have to be roads, but it can also be conditional situations. So anyway, the ODD, or operational design domain, is actually really, really critical to our discussion. So I thought it was definitely worth pointing that out. And then the last term is probably something that you all have heard about at this point. It's ADS, or automated driving system. And just to read the quote, that is, the hardware and software that are collectively capable of performing the entire DDT on a sustained basis, regardless of whether it is limited to a specific operational design domain, or ODD. This term is used specifically to describe a level 3, 4, or 5 driving automation system. So basically, ADS comes about when you get to the higher levels of autonomy in a car. All right, so now that we have the acronyms out of the way, and we kind of have those collectively in our head, let's start looking at this, starting with level 0. So level 0 is pretty easy. That's no driving automation at all. In other words, it's just an old dumb car that you could have bought 20 or 30 years ago. It would have done exactly what I'm going to talk about here. The driver has to be in control at all times. and the driver performs the entire DDT, or dynamic driving task. In other words, they have to drive from their house to the grocery store. The driving automation system, if any, for example, an old-style cruise control that doesn't take account of traffic or anything, does not perform any part of the DDT on a sustained basis, although other vehicle systems may provide warnings or momentary emergency intervention. So again, that's a car that doesn't have like radar-based cruise control. You have a cruise control, you can do that, right? So you can set it and it's going to go 65 miles an hour, but it will also crash straight into the back of the car in front of you if they're going 55 and you're doing 65. So you're still completely in control of this car. They may have some emergency alert things, like if you get too close to something else, or a parking alert system or something. But anyway, this is old style cars that up until, 10 or 15 years ago were pretty much the only kind of cars that existed. Then let's move on to level 1, which is driver assistance. So the role of the driver in this case at all times is performs the remainder of the DDT not performed by the driving automation system, supervises the driving automation system, and intervenes as necessary to maintain operation of the vehicle, determines whether and when engagement or disengagement of the driving automation system is appropriate, immediately performs the entire DDT whenever required or desired. And then the role of the driving automation system when engaged is performs part of the DDT by executing either the longitudinal or lateral vehicle motion control subtask. And also it disengages immediately upon driver request. All right, so what's going on here? Well, basically this is radar-assisted cruise control. It's just a very long-winded way of saying that. And also it could do emergency lane keeping. So our Mazda CX-5, 2018 Mazda CX-5 has these features built in. So basically when you turn on cruise control, if it detects a car in front of it, it will slow down, right? So it will keep a distance. So that would be the longitudinal, moving forward and backwards. And then the lateral task, it has some basic ability. If you start to drift out of your lane, it will warn you and then it will attempt to put you back in. It's not fantastic at that, but it does that. So our Mazda CX-5 is a level 1 autonomous vehicle. It can do things and it's really nice. I mean, it's a huge advantage and a safety advantage. Just the radar-based distance keeping is a massive, I don't know. It reduces your stress when you're driving, especially on the highway or something like that. You just let it go. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to freak out about getting too close to other people. So it reduces the amount of control that you have to have over the car at all times, and it makes it easier for long trips in particular. So that's level 1. I'm sure a lot of people have experienced that by now. Level 2, of course, is where things start to get interesting. A lot of people say that Tesla's at level 2. I'm going to argue to a large extent Tesla's at level 3, but let's get through the definitions first. So anyway, level 2. So level 2 is partial driving automation, and the role of the user at all times, or the driver, is performs the remainder of the DDT not performed by the driving automation system, just like before. So that means that anything that the automated driving system, well, it's not quite up to that level because we have to be L3 before we get there. But anyway, anything that the car is not automatically handling, the user is responsible for. So that's fairly obvious. Continuing on, supervises the driving automation system and intervenes as necessary to maintain operation of the vehicle, determines whether when engagement and disengagement of the driving automation system is appropriate, and immediately performs the entire DDT whenever required or desired. And of course, if you look at level 1 and level 2, the driver role is identical between the two of them. So what the interesting part, of course, that goes from level 1 to level 2 is what the automation system does instead. And let's take a look at that. So in level 2, the driving automation system, while engaged, performs part of the DDT by executing both the lateral and the longitudinal vehicle motion control subtasks, and it disengages immediately upon driver request. So here, as opposed to what I was talking about with the Mazda CX-5, that can do longitudinal control, right? So it's got radar and it maintains a distance behind a slower vehicle in front of it, but it's really poor at doing the side-to-side or lateral control. It doesn't really stay in the lane very well. Definitely a Tesla does that, right? If you put it on autopilot, even the autopilot that's not the FSD, but the one you get included with the car, that will maintain a lane. So you can turn it on the highway and it will stay behind the car, but it will also turn through highway turns and things like that. So that would be level 2 autonomy. It basically can control itself and stay in traffic, and it can stay inside of a lane. It won't make lane changes. It won't get off at an exit. It won't do navigation like that. But let's say you're driving a very long ways and you've got 100 miles to go on the highway, you can set this and forget it. Now you're still in charge, okay? Very clear, the driver role is always to be in charge at these levels of autonomy, but the car itself is doing both the steering and the maintenance of distance between the car in front of it and it. So now we get to level 3, and I want to make a note that what we see at the top of this says levels 3 to 5, ADS, or the automated driving system, performs the entire DDT, or dynamic driving task, while engaged. So what this means is that while the driving system is engaged in its domain, right, the operational domain, it will actually it'll follow it, but it will also change lanes. It will navigate, it'll make turns, it'll get off the highway onto another highway, it'll get off the exit, etc., etc. So this, if you're not driving the Tesla full self-driving beta on the highway, this is basically what's going on with your Tesla, right? It will stay in the lane, it will get out of the lane to get around slower traffic, it will go back into the slow lane again, it will get off at exits, and then it will immediately say like, I'm done, right? So you reach the end of the ODD, or the operational domain, and it can't go any further, and then it turns it back over to you as a driver. But for thoroughness, let's actually read all of the points that SAE has here. So the driver, while the ADS system is not engaged, verifies operational readiness of the ADS-equipped vehicle, determines whether to engage the ADS, becomes the DDT fallback ready user when the ADS is engaged. And then it goes on to describe what the DDT fallback ready user means. That means that they are receptive to a request to intervene and responds by performing DDT fallback in a timely manner, is receptive to DDT performance relevant system failures in vehicle systems, and upon occurrence performs the DDT fallback in a timely manner, determines whether and how to achieve a minimal risk condition, becomes the driver upon disengagement of the ADS. So that's an awful lot of things, but basically what that means is you have to be at the ready at all times. I mean, that's a short way of saying that. You're driving, the car is taking care of itself, but if it goes beep, 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 I need you to take over right now, you have to immediately take over. It also means when it reaches the end of its operational domain, right? It's like, so again, if it does this kind of thing on the highway, but not on city streets, as soon as it exits the highway, it then alerts you and says in 500 feet or 20 seconds or something like that, I am going to turn control back over to you. So you have to be ready to take over when it reaches the end of its operational domain design. And that means that its dynamic driving task is over and yours continues. So if you're driving on the highway and you get off and the domain ends, then you take over and continue on to the grocery store, or whatever your destination is at that point. But so that's what you're doing with the car, and you're completely responsible for it at level 3. And then let's take a look at what the car itself is supposed to do for level 3. So here the automated driving system, while not engaged, permits engagement operation only within its ODD. In other words, only within its operational design domain. Then the ADS, while engaged, performs the entire DDT within its ODD. And that's a pretty crazy thing to say, right? But basically what it's saying is the dynamic driving task within its operational design domain. So just ignore the acronyms. Basically, what it's supposed to do, it does. It also determines whether the ODD limits are about to be exceeded, and if so, issues a timely request to intervene to the DDT fallback ready user. It determines whether there is a DDT performance relevant system failure of the ADS, and if so, issues a timely request to intervene to the DDT fallback ready user. It disengages an appropriate time after issuing a request to intervene, and it disengages immediately upon user request. So at this level, again, it will tell you if it senses a failure or if the weather's bad. Again, anybody who's driven a Tesla, you probably have gotten a thing that says navigate on autopilot is unavailable because the weather is poor, right? It's raining or it's snowing or something. So it exceeds its domain design. It also will tell you that as you get off the highway, if you're driving the old kind of full self-driving, it'll say like, I'm not going to navigate anymore. You got to take over now. It will chime. It will give you emergency alerts if it reaches a situation that it doesn't understand. So again, and the person who's the fallback ready user is just basically the driver. Just means you as the driver, and you are responsible, of course, for the car. So those are all the pieces of the puzzle, and then the car handles everything else within the domain that it's designed to handle. And I think given this definition, it's quite clear that on the highways, Tesla is absolutely a level 3 rated car. It handles all the tasks on the highway. In fact, it very rarely has any kind of emergent situations that you need to deal with. The only thing that I find is if I keep the lane change thing back so it tries to get back in the slow lane, it can do it kind of stupidly once in a while. But really, aside from that, that's the only annoyance with it, but it handles the entire task itself. I drive every day 7 or 8 8 miles to get to work and back again each direction. And I engage the autopilot on the highway and I don't really worry about it until I get off the highway. And now, of course, with the beta, I let it just drive me all the way home. But anyway, even with the beta, with the standard version that's out that people can purchase right now for $10,000 without getting the beta, it is definitely level 3 on the highway. It is definitely not level 3 on the city streets. And even with the beta, I would argue that it's a pretty wishy-washy in terms of that, but it's getting there. But without a doubt, it's level 3 on the highway. No questions asked. It fulfills all of the tasks that are required for level 3 driving, which is why when people say that Tesla's only level 2, that's really not true. Again, saying level 3 does not mean level 3 everywhere, and that's okay because of the ODD, the operational domain design. So that's like, you're allowed to have it be level 3 in some areas and not be level 3 in other areas. That's perfectly fine. All right, anyway, so now let's get to the real fun part, level 4 and level 5. So what does the driver do in level 4 autonomy? The driver/dispatcher, and notice here it says driver or dispatcher because now we're starting to move away from having to have a person sitting in the driver's seat. Anyway, the driver/dispatcher, while the ADS is not engaged, verifies operational readiness of the ADS-equipped vehicle, determines whether to engage the ADS, becomes a passenger when the ADS is engaged only if physically present in the vehicle. The passenger dispatcher, while the ADS is engaged, need not perform the DDT or DDT fallback, need not determine whether and how to achieve a minimal risk condition, may perform the DDT after the ADS reaches its ODD limit, see 5.5 note 2, may request that the ADS disengage, may become the driver after requested disengagement. So notice here now, number 1, not driver anymore, but passenger while it's engaged. Also, they can request to take over, but they're not necessarily granted permission to do that. And also, they don't have to be physically present. So Waymo robotaxis in Phoenix, etc., are that kind of a thing, right? So there is a person who's, got sort of a fallback user who's in a lab someplace, right? Remotely driving it. You've got the passenger in the taxi. That's the sort of situation that we're in with level 4 autonomy. And again, that is level 4. It's a very, very restricted, like 1 square mile domain that it operates in, but within that area, it is definitely level 4 autonomy. As for the car itself, let's take a look at that. The ADS, while not engaged, permits engagement operation only within its ODD. So again, here we've got Waymo, or we've got, Super Cruise or whatever, GM Cruise, the one that's in San Francisco as well. But within the domain that they are operating in, they actually will work, but they will only do it within the geofenced area that they're targeted for. So when people complain about Tesla not ever being able to get to level 4 autonomy, they have to remember that built into the description of level 4 is the operational domain of the vehicle. So you can get to level 4 without being able to drive on 100% of the roads in a country. Continuing on, ADS while engaged performs the entire DDT within its ODD, may prompt the passenger to resume operation of the vehicle when approaching an ODD limit, performs DDT fallback and transitions automatically to a minimal risk condition when a DDT performance relevant system failure occurs, a user requests that it achieve a minimal risk condition, the vehicle is about to exit its ODD. All right, so here you can see a big difference between level 3 and level 4, and that is the fallback. So with level 3 autonomy, when the car fails, when it goes like, oh, I don't know what to do next, it immediately turns it over to the user and says, help me. So that means the driver has to take over. With level 4, the car itself is required to be able to do a fallback to a minimum risk condition. What that probably is going to mean is pulling over to the side of the road or getting off the road into a parking lot or something along those lines. It's going to have to get itself out of a situation if it finds itself in it. So that's the critical difference between level 3 and level 4 is in level 3, the car's driving itself, but it could immediately go into a fail mode, right? And it could immediately request the user to take over. Whereas when you get to level 4, the car itself has to be able to do a fallback. Then the car disengages if appropriate only after it achieves a minimal risk condition or a driver is performing the DDT, and it may delay user requested disengagement. So here you can see that the car, again, is taking care of itself, but also really freakily. It's going to be a very strange day when we get to level 4 and you say, please let me take over in the car driving. And the car says, no, not yet, because it's not safe to do so.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
That is going to be a weird moment when you try to take over driving and it doesn't let you do that. So clearly there is not a car that people are driving, not including like Waymo and stuff like that. There's not a car like that that's out there that's driving at level 4 currently, but you can see how exactly you get from level 3 to level 4. And level 5 now, full driving automation. Driver/dispatcher, while the ADS is not engaged, verifies operational readiness of the ADS-equipped vehicle, determines whether to engage the ADS, becomes a passenger when the ADS is engaged only if physically present in the vehicle. The passenger dispatcher, while the ADS is engaged, need not perform the DDT or DDT fallback, need not determine whether and how to achieve minimal risk condition, may request that the ADS disengage and may achieve a minimal risk condition after it is disengaged, may become the driver after requested disengagement. So really the only difference with that is that the driver may request it and the car can get itself into a minimal risk condition before turning over control of the car to the driver or the passenger in this case. That's the only real difference in terms of the driver or the passenger for level 4 and level 5. As for the automated driving system, the ADS, while not engaged, permits engagement of the ADS under all driver manageable on-road conditions. And this really is the sticking point right here, okay? So this means we're not talking about off-road, we're not talking about like all sorts of crazy things, but to get to level 5, we've now gone from operational design domain, right? So a geofenced area or something like that. We're now extending this to all drivable roads and all drivable conditions for a human being. So that means dirt roads, that means snow, that means rain. It doesn't mean all conditions. If it's a complete whiteout blizzard and you as a human being couldn't drive under those conditions, do not expect a level 5 autonomous vehicle to do that either. But if you can safely drive in the situation, the car needs to be able to do that as well to be considered level 5. So that's the big thing. You're no longer geofenced, you no longer have a domain, you have to drive on every single road in a given country or given, state or something at the very least, and you have to do it under all weather conditions that a human driver could safely do so. Continuing on, the ADS, while engaged, performs the entire DDT, performs DDT fallback, and transitions automatically to a minimal risk condition when a DDT performance relevant system failure occurs or a user requests that it activate a minimal risk condition. It disengages if appropriate only after it achieves minimal risk condition or a driver is performing the DDT, and it also may delay a user requested disengagement. So here again, you can see this is exactly the same as level 4, except there's no longer that ODD statement. There's no longer the operational limits of the vehicle. It has to be able to operate anywhere that a vehicle can operate on roads. It does not have to be able to do off-roading or anything crazy like that, but on any kind of designated road, it has to be able to drive there. So that's the big difference between level 4 and level 5. And that's why achieving level 4 is really the big deal at this point, because getting from level 4 to level 5 just means increasing the effective area of being able to drive in. So you could easily have level 4 that could drive in, say, Manhattan, New York, right? It could do that. It's geofenced to Manhattan or to Phoenix or to San Francisco or something like that. But within that range, it drives completely on its own without having to have human intervention because it can fall back. As we move from there to level 5, it just means we're increasing the area. And this is where Tesla has the massive advantage. When people talk about like Waymo or GM Cruiz or something like that, and they're like, hey, it actually doesn't even need a driver in the seat. That's true, but Tesla can scale to the entire country once they've got this solved. Whereas these other solutions, without high definition LiDAR mapping of individual areas and very, very careful control over this stuff, they can't scale out. They can't move on to the next city like Tesla can. So currently what we've got is within some very narrow geographical limits, we do have cars that are driving at a higher capability or a higher automation level than Tesla is, but they're down here. But as soon as they achieve this, they're going to leapfrog these other companies drastically. They're going to go from not being at level 4 to being at level 4 everywhere, and then they'll be able to move from level 4 to level 5 relatively quickly, again, assuming regulatory approval and all of that kind of stuff. That's not a guarantee with NHTSA and with the people who are advising them these days. You can check out my video on that if you're interested. But anyway, assuming that you have that kind of regulatory approval, then it will be able to do that, and it will be able to do it most, if not all, places in the United States. I want to complete this by turning to a table that this SAE document has that I think also helps to just sort of graphically show this whole thing. Here you can see the user roles while a driving automation system is engaged. So you can see the top sort of blue thing says in-vehicle user. They are the driver for level 0, 1, and 2. For level 3, they're in-vehicle fallback ready user, which means basically that they're the driver if anything goes wrong. And in levels 4 and 5, they're the passenger. For remote driving, which is not as interesting to us right now, but anyway, for level 0, 1, and 2, they're the remote driver. And essentially what that means is it's like almost like driving one of those little toy cars or something, right? You're completely in control of it, but you're just not physically there. At level 3, they're the remote fallback ready user. And at levels 4 and 5, they're the driverless operation dispatcher remote assistant. So you can see how for levels 0, 1, and 2, you're required to be in the car, you're required to be in control at all times. Level 3 is this sort of transitional area, and the Tesla full self-driving on regular package, not beta, on the highways is definitely level 3 at this point. And the beta version of the software is level 3-ish. It still requires an awful lot of fallbacks, but it ticks every single one of the boxes for level 3 if you look back at it. So it requires a number of fallbacks to the driver taking over again because it's still in beta, but it's definitely there in terms of being able to do all of the tasks within its design domain. Now, it doesn't handle parking lots and things like that particularly well. It can't do reversing yet, so it can't get out of a parking place. So there are places that it's not operational yet, but for the places that it is operational, it is definitely a level 3. So the beta software for Tesla full self-driving beta is definitely level 3 at this point. Because remember, the operational design domain is specific and it tells you the places it's not going to work. So given that fact, it works in the places it says it's going to. Yes, it has problems still because it's still in beta and it's not perfect at this point, but it definitely is operating at level 3. And I hope this explains why I say that I think that Tesla is going to get to level 4 autonomy in about 12 to 18 months. Again, I think it's on the lower end of that now after getting 10.4 software, because what that does is it moves us from having the driver have to take over at a second's notice to the car being able to, in its operational design domain, right? So not everywhere yet, that's level 5, but within what it says it's going to do, it will be able to handle it and it will be able to get itself out of trouble without the user having to, re-engage with it. Now, legally, they're definitely not going to get this in that amount of time because they're going to have the data to show NHTSA or some other body that they've actually got this and it's working properly, and there's going to be a bunch of testing, and so it'll take a long period of time after that. So, technically it's not going to be level 4 because the driver will not be legally allowed to be the passenger, but effectively it will be level 4 because the car will drive itself. If it gets in trouble, it will get itself out of trouble. That's the big difference between level 3 and level 4. Right now, if the car gets in trouble, it asks you, it's like beep, 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 please take over immediately. Oh my gosh, what's going on, right? So it freaks out and you have to take over immediately. So you have to be super vigilant. When you get to level 4, the car is going to get itself out of trouble. And then it will say like, oh, by the way, I was in trouble. This was a problem. If you don't mind, could you please take over sometime soon? So that's a lot less stressful. Instead of being there every second going like, oh gosh, when something, going to go wrong, it's like, it takes care of itself. And then it says, hey, by the way, that was a problematic situation. It would be awesome if you could take over at some point. I'm just going to pull over here on the side of the road if you don't. So anyway, that's the difference between level 3 and level 4. So once you achieve full level 3 and you really don't have very many interventions anymore, and you start to move to the car being able to take care of itself, you're transitioning to level 4. And then the only difference between L4 and L5 is where on Earth you're allowed to drive. So that's the difference between those two things. And again, with Tesla, with the manner of work that they're doing, and because it's not geofenced and it's already driving everywhere under these conditions, they can achieve level 4 to level 5 very, very rapidly for them. Whereas these other companies that are geofenced by default and by design are going to have an almost impossible time moving from level 4 to level 5. So that's the big differences. All right, that was super in the weeds. I hope you all were geeking out with me about all of this stuff. I think this SAE document was quite excellent. It really goes through everything in excruciating levels of detail so that you can really start to grasp and understand where we are. And again, my contention, I fully think that it's backed up by this SAE document, is that full self-driving beta is completely level 3 at this point for everything except things like parking lots, driveways, reversing, stuff like that. So it can handle most other situations, and that's what it's designed to do. So that's level 3. And again, I feel like Tesla is going to get to level 4 in approximately 12 months. Again, not regulatory approval for level 4, but effectively level 4. So you'll still be legally driving the car, but it's not going to require interventions anymore. It will take care of itself. That'll be the day when I consider it to be level 4, whether or not anybody has granted it legal access to that, but when the car no longer requires you to intervene and it can take care of itself. It's like, oh crap, I just messed up. I'm in the wrong lane. There's a car in front of me. I can't get back where I was supposed to get. I'm just going to like deal with it and hang out over here or something like that, or pull over to the side of the road, or make a lane change later on and reroute or something along those lines. And it's already starting to do that. It's just not fully there yet, and it requires a lot of emergency interventions because it gets confused. But anyway, it's getting there. I think in 12 months it's going to effectively be there. And after that, level 5 is just a question of like all the weird edge cases. So I hope you think that's pretty cool, because that means that Tesla is further along than a lot of people are giving it credit for right now. So that is very, very exciting news. Andre Karpathy and your AI full self-driving team, you guys are doing an amazing job. So thank you. All right. I hope you all enjoyed this episode and found it fun and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Several of you asked questions about levels of autonomy and full self-driving. And oh gosh, who was it? Was it Steve or was it Niels? One of you actually found this SAE document, which I thought was really, really excellent. So anyway, good job finding the document. I think that was fantastic. It was very helpful. And anyway, if you want to join the club, be part of this conversation behind the scenes, definitely check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in some awesome merch, check out the link in the description. We've got the Tesla Bot t-shirt, which is super popular these days. Don't mess with Tesla. Lots of other t-shirts, tumblers, mugs, etc. So check out the link in the description and help the channel out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how clicking on a link and going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. And as always, feel free to ask me questions in the comments or at my email address, which is drknowitallknows@gmail.com. Till next time, bye-bye.